Okay, let's go ahead and get going here. So my name is Sarah. I work with the Natural Areas Association in programming, and I'm glad that you are able to join us today. You've been trying out the chat function, testing that out. We're going to be using that to receive your questions during the presentations, and then we'll have a question answer session at the end of the talk where I'll be asking your questions of our presenters. Real quickly, just want to tell you who we are. We're the Natural Areas Association. We're a member-supported nonprofit. We're over 40 years old, and in our work, we provide networking, training, and advocacy for natural areas professionals. We support your work in conservation and natural areas management by bringing you the latest science and best practices through the Natural Areas Journal, which is a quarterly peer-reviewed publication, regional workshops, the annual Natural Areas Conference, and webinars like this one. I encourage you to visit naturalareas.org or connect with a colleague who is a member to learn more about how we support your work. We do have several upcoming events. Next Tuesday is another webinar, June 30th. This one is with Rich Hatfield of the Xerces Society. He'll be sharing information with us on bumblebees and talking to us about how we can conserve bumblebees in natural areas. So join us for that. Registration is open and available through our website, naturalareas.org. We have another webinar that we just announced yesterday. This one's coming up in July on the 21st. This is with Dr. Paul Rogers, the director of the Western Aspen Alliance. He'll be talking about aspen ecology and conservation, giving an overview, preparing you for a special symposium session that'll happen during the 2020 Natural Areas Conference coming up in October. We are still planning to hold our Natural Areas Conference. It will be a virtual event, a teleconference. So please check our website for more details about that. We expect to be opening registration for that soon. We do have an archive available, a video archive available of last week's video on conserving fireflies by Candace Fallon with the Xerces Society. So that video is available through our YouTube channel and it's also available through our website. All right, there you go, Lisa.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. This webinar is part of a series of webinars that we're offering this year that are focused on the importance of native seed and natural areas management. These specific webinars are made possible and free to you through the generous underwriting of our partners at the Bureau of Land Management's Plant Conservation and Restoration Program, and through the in-kind support of our partners like the Institute for Applied Ecology, who you're about to hear from. We're fortunate to be able to work with several partners like these to make webinars like this one today free of charge to you. But not all are underwritten. And so we'd like to encourage those of you who find this type of program of value to become a member members of NAA. It's one of the ways that you can support us so that we're able to continue to offer this type of valuable resource to you. As we are all experiencing, times are changing, and while we're determined to not waver from offering this important information and support to our community, we're faced with the challenge of funding some of this work. So I think you'll see in the near future that a membership in NAA will bring with it even more benefit for those of you working in natural areas conservation. And a big thanks to those of you who are members. We look forward to continuing to serve you as we can. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have Stacy Moore, who coordinates the Institute for Applied Ecology's Sustainability in Prisons project. This includes educational programming, native plant propagation at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, the Snake River Correctional Institution, and the Oak Creek Youth Authority in Oregon. Joining Sarah is her associate, Tyler Knapp, who also works with the Prisons Project at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, where female inmates grow larval host plants for threatened and endangered native butterflies. He also facilitates the Sagebrush in Prisons project, coordinating inmates' work to grow sagebrush seedlings to be used in restoring sage grouse habitat. So welcome to both Stacy and Tyler. Thank you for the webinar today.
Great. Well, it's such a delight to be here with everyone. Probably most people feel quite isolated. I have a little office in my barn and it's so exciting to be here. I wore earrings today and real clothes for kind of the first time. So thank you all for joining us. And we're excited to present Unlocking Boundaries, Sustainability in Prisons Projects, focusing on native plant propagation. And I work for Institute for Applied Ecology. It's a nonprofit in Corvallis, Oregon. And our mission is to conserve native species through restoration, research, and education. And I'm here with Tyler.
Hi everyone, I'm an ecological education coordinator with the Institute for Applied Ecology.
Great. And some of our partners in the Sustainability in Prisons projects are DEQ in Wyoming, Sustainability in Prisons project at Evergreen State College, and our main funder with the Bureau of Land Management. There we go. So the purpose of the Sagebrush in Prisons project, and I'm going to focus mainly on the sagebrush program, is to improve habitat for greater sage grouse by engaging state and federal prison systems in production of sagebrush for habitat restoration on BLM lands. And the bird that we are focusing on is the greater sage grouse. And historically, they're numbered about 16 million greater sage grouse. And today there's between 200 to 500,000 individuals. And the greater sage grouse is a sage obligate species, meaning that the birds depend on sagebrush for every phase of their life cycle. So the hens lay 8 to 10 eggs underneath mature sagebrush plants. When the chicks hatch, they eat insects and leaves on forbs. But as the birds mature, they switch their diet to eating the leaves of sagebrush. On this map, the light blue is the historic range of the greater sage grouse, and the dark blue is the current range of the sage grouse. And you can see from this map that the birds have lost about 50% of their habitat. So what are some of the threats to the sagebrush steppe? Wildfires, annual grasses and weeds, change in density of juniper trees, and conversion to other land uses. So what we're seeing with wildfires are that fires are starting earlier in the season, going later into the season, and a lot of fires are covering much greater acreage than they did historically. And if you look at the bottom right photo, after these large hot fires, it just turns the landscape into a moonscape. And it's really difficult to reestablish the plants in the ecosystem after these hot burns. And what we found is that if you can plant healthy plugs with a good root system back into these ecosystems, that the ecosystem recovers sooner than if you just scattered seed out into the landscape. So weeds, what is a weed that might come to your mind that is taking over a lot of the sagebrush steppe? One weed that comes to my mind is cheatgrass. And cheatgrass germinates early in the season, then dies off early in the season, providing a lot of fuel for fires. And as you can see in this slide, cheatgrass can just take over the sagebrush steppe landscape. Something else that's affecting the birds is in some areas where there's been fire suppression, we're seeing a change in the density of juniper trees. And when you get a big increase in density of juniper trees, it creates a canopy out on the landscape, and the greater sage grouse like open areas so they can see their predators. So this is a change for some of the greater sage grouse. Other things that are affecting the landscape are mineral and mining, oil exploration. Green energy can affect the birds. The birds are very elusive. They don't like to be around people. They don't like changes in their landscape. So this is a change. And overgrazing. The birds can coexist with grazing, but overgrazing can be a problem for the birds. So on this map, the dark area is the current range of the greater sage grouse, and all those dots you see are different prisons. And you can see that there's a lot of prisons either right within the greater sage grouse habitat or nearby, making prisons perfect partners for this program. And with our sustainability in prisons projects, we are currently working with 11 different prisons. And with the sagebrush program, which is represented by the red dots here, we're working in 5 different states: Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, California, and Wyoming. So you might be asking yourself, well, why work with adults in custody in prisons, and how does one get started with this program? So I think it was in 2012, Tom Kay, our executive director, and myself, we went to a conference put on by the Sustainability in Prisons Project up in Evergreen State College. And at this conference, we learned that a lot of prisons need more quality work programs for adults in custody. There's often just not enough programs for participants. And then we learned from the BLM that there's a real need for native plants out on the landscape, especially in these wildfire burn areas. So we brought these 2 concepts together. And what we found are that the adults in custody provide really high quality, detailed work and supply quality plants. This program helps reduce idleness and behavior problems within the prison, and it gives adults in custody valuable skills. It provides good image to the public, and it offers a chance for restorative justice. And I want to add at this time that these programs are absolutely voluntary. No adult in custody is forced to work on these programs. And in fact, we often have an application process and often interviews to get into this program, kind of like practice for job interviews. And we find that there's usually more interest in the program than we have openings. The adults in custody absolutely love to get their hands dirty, to grow living things, and to get outside. So no one is forced into this program, but we find there's a real interest and love of this program. So our timeline, usually in September, we go to the prisons to meet with the staff and gear up for the program. November, December, the BLM collects the sagebrush seed, and they collect the seed in the area where we will ultimately plant the plants. So we want these plants to be adapted to the area where they're going to be planted. So these are eco-sourced seeds. In March, we start our lecture and education programs, and these are super important. Otherwise, you start this program and inmates and staff go, well, why the heck are we growing sagebrush? It's everywhere. Why are we doing this program? But when you can do these education series and teach people about the importance of our ecology, about the greater sage grouse and its plight, it really gets people on board and understanding why they're doing this program. In April, we prepare the containers, and the beginning of May, we sow the plants. After that, the adults in custody do daily watering. Later, they thin, fertilize the plants, and in October, November, we do our fall planting at restoration sites. And since we work in all these different states, we could not do this program without our dedicated, wonderful contractors. Our contractors go into the prison every single week to work right alongside the adults in custody to teach them how to sow the plants, how to thin, fertilize, what problems to look for. And our contractors also run the education programs. So on the left photo here, the lovely gal with the hat on, this is Shannon Swim, a dynamic gal who is absolutely loved by the inmates and officers. And Shannon runs 3 prisons in Nevada and a federal prison in California. So she's got a lot on her plate and does a fantastic job. On the upper right, this is a photo from the Wyoming Honor Farm prison, and Tina Russell, who's on the left in that photo, she has helped start this program last year and is running this program again this year. So she got this program started from the ground zero. And on the bottom right is Crystal Niddle, who's worked directly in the prison at Warner Creek Correctional Facility in Oregon, and that she's also been involved in the program with the inmates. And here's our dynamic trio here in our Idaho program. And on the left is Nancy DeWitt, and she's holding a big eagle there. And Nancy's been with the program, I think, 4 or 5 years. And she's been instrumental in getting wonderful lectures and speakers coming into the program. Bottom right is Anda Bolt, who's a retired BLM botanist. And she's talked with women from South Boise Women's Correctional Center. And top right is our newest member, Holly Hovis, who joined the program because she wants to make a difference in nature and she wants to make a difference in people's lives. So she is now the lead for the Idaho and an Oregon program. So thank you all for your wonderful dedication to the Sagebrush in Prisons project. So to start out, the adults in custody mix the soil by hand. We use a mixture of perlite, vermiculite, and peat, and a little bit of Sunshine Sungrow number 4. And then the adults in custody put that soil into 8-inch ray leach containers. They tamp the soil down and then carefully sprinkle seeds right on top. Then the adults in custody water the plants, usually twice a day, every day. And then later they thin and fertilize the plant. The top right is Shannon Swim with some of her participants in Nevada. And the inmates are so dedicated to this program. They are absolutely fantastic data collectors. And on the left, you can see that adults in custody have written down the germination rates for every table that they're growing the plants. And on the right, they've taken a daily log to write down temperatures, things they're seeing. And we find that we learn a lot from the adults in custody every year and modify the program according to suggestions from our participants. I wanted to give you a little view of some of the different prisons. Top left is Warner Creek Correctional Facility in Oregon, and the participants designed their own shade cloth right over the tables. On the right is Lovelock Correctional Center, and there's Shannon on the left, and you could just feel the enthusiasm of the adults in custody there. Bottom right is a medium facility. This is Idaho State Correctional Center, and that this is a courtyard, and before it was just bare ground, and now it's a sea of green, of living plants. And on the left is South Boise Women's Correctional Center. And because the inmates are growing plants and there's water there, they're creating a whole little ecosystem within the prison's grounds. And on the left is a fence lizard that they're finding in Nevada. In the bottom right, this is an Idaho State Correctional Center, and I was visiting, and the adults in custody were like, Stacy, Stacy, come meet Walter. He's our pet praying mantis. And over in another corner, we have Henry. And in the same area, there was a western kingbird making a nest up in the razor wire, and there was goldfinches coming down and drinking water. So this program is bringing an ecosystem, green, living things within the prison walls. So in the fall, we take the plants out of the containers, put them in bags, and then put them in boxes for delivery to the restoration site. Top left is Peggy Olwell with the BLM, and she came out and worked right alongside the adults in custody last season to help box up the plants. In the bottom right, Nevada grew so many plants, they needed a semi-trailer tractor there to take the plants to the restoration sites. And so last year we grew almost 430,000 plants in one season. And then in the fall, in some cases, the adults in custody can come out and plant the plants at the restoration sites. These are plants that they grew, bringing the program full circle. Another important piece of the program is our education series. And we often have people from the outside coming into the prison to present to the adults in custody. And this is so neat because the adults in custody, after these cool education programs, when they talk to their families on the phone, they share what they've learned with their families. Or often we have officers come in and listen to these programs, and then they share with their family or community. So these education programs are far reaching than just what's happening in the prison. And the people from the outside that come in, when they first come in, they're very nervous, but virtually every speaker has said, this has been the most enthusiastic, polite audience they have ever spoken to. And then at the end of our program, we give certificates to every adult in custody that has participated. And on the back of these certificates, we list out all the things, skills that the adults in custody have learned: team building, data collection, the various horticulture skills. And it's our hopes that if the adults in custody would like, upon release, that they can maybe use this to show an employer the wonderful work that they have done within prison. And these certificates are so meaningful to the participants. I had one woman at South Boise Women Correctional Center who just burst into tears. She said, this is the first time I have ever been successful with something in my life. So these little things mean a lot. So things have changed right now because of the land of the coronavirus. So all of our prisons have shut down to outside visitors. But all but 2 of the prisons agreed to continue the program. So our wonderful contractors wrote detailed manual step-by-step instructions for every prison so the program could continue. So the adults in custody are doing the program by themselves with input from the contractors. And on the left there, Shannon Swim with her mask on. She's going to just the visitor's entrance there, and they brought out some plants for her to look at. And on the right, you can see adults in custody with a mask on working with plants. This is one of Tyler's programs. But our contractors are trying to continue the education series. We had 2 speakers do a program on Zoom, a Zoom meeting for the adults in custody. And we're doing hard copies of lessons for the adults in custody, as well as scanning lessons, so that we can still have some education going and some feedback. So it's difficult, but we are still doing the program. So we find this program is a win-win-win. It's a win for the adults in custody. And the number one thing I hear from them is they say it feels so good to be able to give back to the community. I think that's the number one thing I hear. It feels so good to be able to contribute. It's good for nature. It's good for our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to show you a wonderful video, short video, that National Audubon Society did on this program. Your plants are going to help restore the land for the greater sage grouse. We started this program in 2014 right here at Snake River. This was the first prison. The greater sage grouse needs sagebrush for every phase of its life cycle. The BLM collects seed in the area where they want the plants to go in. In April, they give the seed to Institute for Applied Ecology, and we start sowing those seeds at the prisons.
This is primarily a volunteer job. When I don't keep busy, I get all stressed out, thinking about home, thinking about my kids. It is very therapeutic. I have never ever seen or heard of a sage grouse.
Just reminds me why I want to do good things in life and obey the law and be there for my family.
And sagebrush does not regenerate after a fire, so we have to go in and plant these seedlings. With that 8-inch long taproot that we've grown, they are able to compete with the flammable invasive grasses.
We get anywhere from 40 to nearly 100% survival, depending on where the site is. Much better establishment than if you just scattered sagebrush seed out onto the landscape.
I'm in here on violent charges, and so to give back to the world, I feel like it's probably just the highlight for me. This is the kind of stuff that my daughters like to do. This kind of just reminds me of being with them. But that's probably the hardest part, is just not being with them, you know what I mean?
I'm really honored to present certificates of achievement to you guys today for the amazing work that you've done for the year. On the back, there's a list of the job skills, characteristics that you had to acquire or exhibit in order to be a successful member of the team here. And this information can be used on job applications or resumes in the future.
I didn't know much about it. I always thought it was a weed, just a wild weed, you know.
I thought it was a spice you put on your turkey or ham.
The only plants that I've ever dealt with was
This season, we've grown just a little over 450,000 plants at 10 prisons.
We get to do something good for the habitat here in South Boise, which is really nice.
Some of the people I'm definitely going to keep in contact with, they're absolutely good women here.
And I want to say that the truth I see in you and you and you is an individual that cares about living things. I see the truth in you as an individual that gives back to our community. And it's my hope that you see that truth within yourself as well.
It's great for your self-esteem and what you're doing for the environment. It makes a difference.
It takes a little bit of freedom, kind of get used to being around people again.
I get out 2021, December. I'll be home for Christmas.
I'll be getting out 2022, January 30th.
I will be on transport back to Nez Perce County on February 3rd.
Just 18 more months.
Since I started the program, I've sowed probably about 75,000 plants.
Okay, so the next part of our project that we're going to talk about is the Sustainability in Prisons program at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon. This is a women's prison. And At the medium security part of the prison, there's a crew of ladies that grows English plantain, which is a larval host plant for the endangered Taylor's checker spot butterfly. There's also a lab at that same prison where there's a crew of women that rear these caterpillars and butterflies, feeding them the English plantain leaves that are harvested right there on site. And then they're also growing early blue violet at the minimum security, which is a larval host plant for the threatened Oregon silver spot butterfly. And for these butterflies, there's a lab at the Oregon Zoo where they're reared, and the blue violets are harvested bi-weekly and then picked up by the Oregon Zoo and taken there to feed the butterflies. These, once the butterflies pupate, they are then taken out to the wild areas and released. And this gives them a head start so they don't get eaten as caterpillars. This portion of the talk is mostly going to be about the newest program that we started in the Mojave Desert, the Mojave Desert Seed Rehabilitative Training Program, DSRT. And this program started when the Mojave Desert Native Plant Coordinator for the Bureau of Land Management, Judy Perkins, contacted us because she wanted to build up the seed bank for the Mojave Desert plants. And she'd heard about the Sagebrush in Prisons program, and California City Correctional Facility was looking for more educational opportunities for the people there. And so we all combined forces and started this program this spring. And it's funded, by the BLM. And just like with the sagebrush prisons, the sagebrush being grown in prisons in the sage grouse habitat, all these plants that we're growing are in the threatened Mojave Desert tortoise habitat and range. And you can see the red dot there is where the California City Correctional Facility is. And about 10 miles away, the green dot, that's the desert tortoise natural area. And this range goes up into southern Nevada, from Southern California, over into Utah and Arizona. These are some of the threats to the desert tortoise, very similar threats to the sage grouse. Mining, military land use, like the expansion of Fort Irwin, overgrazing, off-highway vehicles, diseases, which are usually due to people releasing their captive tortoises out to the wild, and this disease is spreading to the wild tortoises. Urbanization, predators, due to urbanization and agriculture expansion, the raven population has increased greatly, and the ravens can easily peck through the juvenile tortoise shells, so that has been a problem in addition to wild dogs. The green energy and solar especially has been really big in the Mojave Desert, and that takes up a lot of habitat for the desert tortoise. And invasive plants, railroads, power lines, etc. Here's some common signs you'll see in the Mojave Desert. Road signs and signs discouraging people from releasing their captive tortoises. There's even a number there if you wish to adopt a desert tortoise that's already a captive. So one of the first things we did for this program, we hired a contractor similar to the Sagebrush in Prisons project, since our office is based in Corvallis, Oregon. It's quite a ways from Southern California. And we hired Uma Nicole. She lives down in the area in the Mojave Desert, and she has experience working in various prisons down there doing gardening programs and education. And she also runs an urban community garden in LA. And she provided a statement for me to read. She said, "The Mojave DSRT program is precious because it provides its incarcerated participants with a fundamental need of time with nature, which in turn reconnects them to their humanity. No one would say that serving time in prison is easy on the soul. So to offer a more effective and holistic path to rehabilitation, Incarcerated individuals need to be provided with opportunities to care for their mental and spiritual well-being. And UMA also teaches mindfulness meditation in prisons. So in the upper left, this is what the prison yard area looked like before we put in the nursery. This is a California city. And the facilities crew there put in this shade cloth using camo netting due to the high winds. They wanted that instead of regular shade cloth. Then in the bottom right, you see the tables that were built to put the plants on, and all the containers were delivered. There were water lines installed and buried, and all the soil mixture was delivered there too. And the tool storage area was built, and all the tools were put in there. In March, we sowed the seeds. We got all of the soil mixed and blended. We used a recipe that was provided by the Joshua Tree National Park Native Plant Nursery. And we mixed all the soil on site and then filled these containers and sowed 7 different species of seed. And these are all the guys there. They all applied for the program and interviewed. And we're currently working towards getting meritorial credit for them, which is a way for them to get time off their sentences with the more time that they work. And so that's in process. The seed crew goes out every day to take care of these plants and water them as needed, fertilize, then weed, and then transplant. Sometimes they have to transplant from a smaller container to a bigger container. And some of the modifications we made due to the pandemic, we haven't been able to go inside to visit and help out or do any education in person since mid-March. So we've been communicating via FaceTime. This is the Associate Warden, Christy Torres. So I was able to check in with the crew and answer their questions and check on the plants as well. And we've been sending in self-study packets of horticulture lessons that they are then completing on their own in their cells and sending out. They'll fill out the homework and then send it to us, and we'll give them feedback and send that back. So we're still keeping the education program going from a distance. And at one point, only one crew member was allowed to go and water the plants due to a coronavirus lockdown. This is the area that's going to be a field, which will have a rabbit-proof fence about 4 feet high. And all the compost you see there will be spread and tilled into the field. And some of the perennials that they grew in the pots will be planted out. And annuals will be directly sown. So here's some of the plants we're growing. The first one is the Eastern Mojave buckwheat. And the desert needlegrass. The picture in the upper right is the ones at the prison. Desert pepperweed. Desert marigold. Smooth desert dandelion. There's a commonality of the word desert in a lot of these. Desert plantain. And chia. These ones, the seeds are starting to mature, and the crew just got a self-study lesson in seed collection and harvesting, and so they will be doing all of that work as well, collecting the seeds and storing them and sending them to the Bend seed extractory to be cleaned and stored. And then eventually, once that seed bank gets built up enough, those seeds will be sent out to commercial growers to further bulk it up and plant out for the restoration for the desert tortoise. I asked the guys to send in some statements to share with you for this webinar, and I'm going to share a couple of those. This is Mr. Dyer. He said, "Thanks. The opportunity to become humanized and care for something other than oneself, especially in a self-centered environment such as prison, is truly priceless. And in watching plants grow, it is truly amazing but there's so much to learn about man's interaction with plants and the animals that benefit. Oh yeah, and the time outside the cell in the sunshine is great. And then Mr. Mendiola shared, what I've gotten out of this program is the knowledge of learning to care for someone or something other than myself. In this environment, it's always a worry about yourself type of living. But upon exiting the building and entering the garden, there is a sense of relief and a feeling that I can breathe better. The only focus out here is the plants. To watch them grow gives me pride. I get pride because I know that I contributed to the growth and life of something that is overlooked so easily. I'm allowing an ecosystem to thrive out in the wild. The plants we grow allow the tortoise to live. And this brings me happiness, which is hard to find in prison. So we just want to thank all of these people, the crew, especially Uma, Judy Perkins, all the staff at California City, and the various experts that we consulted on Mojave Desert plant propagation. Now we're going to turn it over to Sarah to facilitate the question and answer.
Just going back to the chat log, some questions that came in earlier. There were quite a few questions about the concept of restorative justice and concerns about the ethics of using prison labor, even voluntary prison labor, in this program. And those are discussions that we will not have time to fully address in the time that we have left. And I do apologize for that, but I would encourage you to reach out to Stacy and Tyler directly. Their contact information is available through the IAE website, the Institute of Applied Ecology website that I shared earlier in the chat, and I'm sure that they would be happy to hear from you. You can also reply to me, SPEARS @naturalareas.org. It's my email address that you've been receiving emails from for the webinar, so you could just reply to me as well. And we will put you in touch with Tyler and Stacy. So again, with the few minutes that we have left, there were some technical questions. So someone was asking about more information about BLM funding opportunities for projects like this. Did these projects come about through an RFP from the BLM?
So yeah, we have a close relationship with the BLM, and at the moment we have an assistance agreement. So we've, yeah, mostly through assistance agreements is how we're doing it right now.
Okay. So someone who was looking to do something similar would want to look for that kind of an agreement with the BLM.
Yeah, and there's other folks too. Audubon Society sometimes want plants. Fish and Game departments want plants. So I'd say any natural resource partner, check in with them, because there really is a need for native plants on the landscape. So reach out to folks.
Okay, great. So being proactive about getting these projects started. There was a question about plant pathogen considerations and nursery BMPs. It sounds like you're doing a lot of education around horticultural practices. There was a particular concern about Phytophthora, which apparently is prevalent in the San Francisco Bay Area. Can you address that concerns that or pathogens that you've had to deal with in these nurseries?
Our number one pathogen has been root rot in growing these plants, especially last year was a little bit, so it's Pythium. It was a little bit cooler season, and everybody loves to water plants, but these are desert plants, so we really have to tell the participants it's time to cut back on the watering. So at a couple prisons, we had some root rot issues, but that's about the only issue we've really had. Something else we had to watch out for was the pH. Some of the waters, comes from wells or whatever and has really low pH. So at times we've had to add lime to the containers, and that fixed that problem. But our number one issue has been root rot.
Okay, good to know. I just want to acknowledge that we are getting close. It just flipped over the hour now. So again, thank you for sticking with us through the technical issues that we had getting started and with the video. Again, I apologize for that. We will have a recording published through the Natural Areas Association website and through our YouTube channel. We'll also share the link to the video by the Audubon that we showed where Stacy was interviewed. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you, Stacy and Tyler, for your presentations and for sharing the work that you do, especially how it's continuing through the COVID-19 pandemic. Really appreciate that. Also want to acknowledge the Bureau of Land Management as the funding sponsor for this webinar. We really appreciate their support, and it enables us to bring good science and innovative practices, innovative programs like this one to you. So thanks to them for funding. Have a good afternoon, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday for our next webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks for your comments. Nice to share with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy and Tyler. Bye, everybody.